Hi, everyone. We are so glad you could join us today for Creative Coping Poetry. My name is Alofa, and I am an event coordinator for Samaritan Counseling Center, Hawaii. And Anissa, who is working behind the scenes to make sure Zoom runs smoothly, is the deputy director at NAMI Hawaii. Please feel free to enter your name and where you are joining us from in the chat. While you do that, I'll share a little bit about us. NAMI Hawaii provides mental health programs and educational classes such as NAMI's free support groups for peers and families and a free 8-week family-to-family program. Samaritan Counseling Center Hawaii is a nonprofit organization that provides professional, accessible mental health counseling services sensitive to the spiritual traditions of individuals, families, and communities in Hawaii, regardless of their ability to pay. We also coordinate community events, just like this one, to provide mental health education, strengthen resilience, and help reduce the stigma of mental illness. Plus, as a part of our Creative Coping series, we will be offering a booklet compiling all of the work created and submitted by our attendees. After today's workshop, you will receive a link that will allow you to submit your work. If you'd like to learn more about what our organizations offer, please visit namihawaii.org or SamaritanCounselingCenterHawaii.org. Also, a few quick reminders before we start. This workshop is for educational purposes only and is not therapy or treatment advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider if you have specific mental health concerns. Please keep in mind that we want to create a safe, supportive space where people are free to share their stories and questions and receive understanding and compassion. Also note that we are recording this workshop, so it can be uploaded to our YouTube channel later. If you would prefer, you are welcome to change your name on Zoom to protect your privacy. Last but not least, we ask that you remain muted when you are not speaking. Now that we've gone through all that, I will pass it off to our host, Rudiger.
Okay. First, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. Great. Then I want to thank Samaritan Counseling Center Hawaii and NAMI Hawaii for making this workshop possible. And before I introduce myself, I want to thank Alofa Carpenter and Anissa Weissman for their time and brilliance in bringing us all together. And believe me, they have given lots of time and lots of their brilliance in making this all happen. We've been working together more or less for about a month on this, so I'm so grateful to them. Third, I want to thank and welcome all of you to our workshop. Writing poetry, especially sharing poetry, is an act, even a leap of faith. And you have all taken that leap of faith by being here today. So please know we are all in this together, and I look forward to it. I want to introduce myself a bit, give a little bit of my background. My name is Rudiger. It is a real honor to be with you. I want to welcome you to my home. I share with my husband, Dr. Ben, and our beautiful daughter, Ellen. You may see a Christmas tree in the background. We do keep it up all year. And even though Ben and Ellen are Buddhist, I'm a plain Quaker, and I believe that every day is to be celebrated. So we do keep our tree up all year. You may see that in the background. I wrote about the tree in MidWeek, which is a weekly newspaper in Hawaii. It's a column called Chasing the Light. And we have a neighbor who does the same. We've actually never met, but we interact through each other, knowing that when we turn on our lights in the evening for our Christmas tree, a few houses down, he does too. I'm a teacher, I'm a tennis fan. I love Wimbledon. It starts on Monday, and I know we have a guest here from Great Britain. I'm an advocate for civil rights and mental health wellness. In fact, I'm very lucky to work for a new nonprofit, Transcend Integration, that seeks to make professional mental health services affordable for all individuals. Poetry has been a constant, joyful companion my entire life. I first published a poem when I was 7. It appeared in my school's weekly bulletin. I was thrilled. My father kept it in his office for years. I even remember the first line, "Upon my heart, I seek my will." It was about George Washington. And guess what? It really wasn't a good poem. I was lucky because my second grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, I still remember her name, read us poems every day. I will never forget her reading The Swing by Robert Louis Stevenson. I could go back to that school today and tell you exactly where I sat when I first heard that poem. Between 8th grade and my senior year, I won 8 National Poetry Awards. The first was kind of an accident. We were given homework options after reading Hey Dummy by Kim Platt. In that novel, the protagonist befriends a cognitively impaired boy who is shunned by his classmates, parents, even his teachers. I put myself in the boy's shoes and wrote poems about how the world reacted to me as a cognitively impaired boy. To my surprise, it won a Scholastic National Writing Award, my first of 3. I didn't write poetry to win awards, but I also didn't mind winning them. Poetry gave me an identity when I needed it most. I was bullied a great deal growing up, but I always felt safe and my best self when I wrote or read a poem. I often considered myself ugly. Once in high school, I was working backstage for a school play, trying to keep out of sight. Then a teacher asked my name. When I told her, she smiled and said, "You're the poet. I can't wait to read your poems." That night, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I thought, well, maybe my words can show that I'm really not ugly. In my senior year, as a public school kid, I tied for first place with a young woman from Interlochen Arts Academy, a private school I wanted to attend but couldn't afford. Together, we won the best poem written by a high school senior in the United States. It was called Lab Experiment, and I wrote it after dissecting a pig in biology class. I hated biology. At 17, I was flown to a literary festival and met a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, Liza Mueller. Because of poetry, I received a scholarship to Syracuse University that I would otherwise not have been able to afford. And I met and studied privately with wonderful poets like Jory Graham, Tess Gallagher, and Haydn Carruth. Poetry has been a friend who has never let me down. It's introduced me to writers, artists, and helped me have my voice heard in magazines, journals, even galleries. It's sometimes maddening when I struggle with a new draft, but it always gives me joy. I've been extremely blessed that poetry has found me, and I look forward to how it can find you and your poetic voices. Next slide, please. Before I learn about you, and I would love to do some introductions, I just wanted to tell you that there are many different ways for poetry to have your voice be heard these days. On the left side, you'll see the traditional, which is submitting poems to a publication. And I've done that a million times, been accepted, been rejected. That's kind of been the traditional way for many years. Today, however, there are so many opportunities. You can go online and be published. There are blogs, there are Facebook groups. Like I said before, there are even exhibitions. The poem on the right, I had published in a magazine also online, and to my great surprise, I clicked on it the other day. There's actually a recording of it, but guess what? It's not my voice. So nonetheless, it was a thrill. I thought, wow, somebody actually is reading my poem to the general public. Next slide, please. For all people in this workshop, I want to reassure you that poetry is a process. For me, when I write a poem, it's been in my head for 1 or 2 days. And as you can see from this slide, when it does come out, it is far from perfect. I do write it by hand, and you can see what I've crossed out, where I think, no, this line needs to be arranged. It is far from perfect, and I hope everyone in this workshop will not expect a poem to be perfect. It is a process, but it's a joyful process. Next slide, please. I usually take a poem through 3 or 4 drafts before I show it to my husband, who is my best critic. I'll let it sit for a while, and then I'll decide, do I want to submit it, or do I want to let it rest for a while? This is the better version of the original draft. It's still not perfect. I'm still changing. I'm still tweaking. In fact, I've had poems from 5 years ago that I'm still tweaking. And that's part of the joy and way of coping with poetry. It takes you through different stages of your life. It helps you rediscover yourself. You are not probably the same person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And for me, that's what's wonderful about poetry. It can move along with you as you change through life. So I think we're doing well. And before we move into our exercises, this is your workshop. And I think time will permit for all of us to introduce ourselves. And if you wish to, there's no pressure whatsoever. But if you wish to introduce yourself and perhaps explain why you joined us today, that could be quite nice. I'll mute myself while that's happening. And it's always somebody has to go first. So, and I'm not going to call on people. I am a teacher, but I'm not going to call on people. Well, you know what? From one teacher to another. Sorry, Lois, I'm putting you on the spot here.
I'm Lois Toyama from Honolulu, and I'm retired, long time retired, and I thought this might be a good way to get my brain greased up and writing more. I like to write, but I don't often write, so I thought this might be inspiring to me. Yep, that's it.
Oh, thank you. Again, you don't have to share, but this is part of our wonderful gathering.
Hi, my name is Ann Bennett. I just graduated with my associates in liberal arts from UH Maui. And I've never really been interested. I mean, no, I've never really tried poetry. I've written a few poems. They're not very good, but I like reading and writing.
Well, thank you, Anne. And I'm sure the poems are great. The other thing I want to say, there is no judgment here. This is, we don't judge each other. We don't judge poems. I mean, as I said in my intro, poetry is joyful in so many ways. When you read a good poem, when you hear a good poem, when you write a good poem. And as I showed you for my chicken scratch, when I write it out, I do not sit there thinking, oh boy, out of my brain is going to come a great poem. You know, it's trust me, I've taken poems through.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Anne. Anybody else? Patricia, I'm hearing you speak, but you're muted.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I'm Patricia Baines Jordan, and I love poetry, although I've never really gotten into it. But even as a kid out here at Pokai Bay, I would walk to the end of the rock breakwater and just sit and write poetry by myself. And usually it was poetry of misery, which came from the heart. And I would like some guidance in how to write poetry. I want to continue this, and I really appreciate your giving us your background and the sample poems showing your process. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Patricia. And again, I just want to underscore here, I've been writing poetry pretty much my entire life. It is a process. I've read thousands of poems, and I would say I have found two out of the thousands that are perfect. So what I can say to you as writers or as people who want to write, who want to start this joyful journey, don't expect perfection because, like I said, I have probably read about 4,000 poems in my life, and I have only found two where I say, oh boy, this is something that can't possibly be improved. And believe me, my own writing, I'm thinking it can always be improved. So.
Thank you.
Sheldon, I see that you're unmuted, or Susan, would you like to introduce yourselves?
I can go. My name is Susan Ford, and I just finished, I guess, since 2017, I've been working with Stanford University doing forgiveness groups. And I decided after all this time, I finished a 3-day conference that I organized, and it's time for me. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I am familiar with NAMI from some years back. I've worked 40 years with persons with disabilities. Love the work. And I was looking for something that met two of my needs. And one of my needs that I wanted to is find something joyful for myself to do now that I don't have any more groups. And joyful for the people that I work with. There's so many different ways of coping, and everybody's different. But I've never used poetry as a possibility. I always used it for myself, thinking, well, this is a possibility because I like to write. But sharing it and learning more is just so fascinating to me. So thank you very much. Oh, I'm from Oahu, Pearl City.
Yeah, Susan, thank you. And I'm so glad you mentioned the coping as well. In my introduction, and I mentioned growing up, not the easiest time, not that it is hardly ever for any teenager, but coping poetry, definitely. I mean, there were all kinds of times, and I thought, okay, I'm either going to find a tennis court or I'm going to write a poem. and I would say, in fact, I still do that. And as you can see, I'm no longer a teenager. So I'm so glad, Susan, you mentioned that the coping aspect as well. I think we can have a few more minutes of introductions. Anybody else?
Hello, Rudiger. I'd like to say a few words. And as Rudiger mentioned, I am his cousin-in-law. My name is Bobby Longworth, and I'm pleased to join you from the mainland in Virginia. I found that looking back on life, journaling and which typically rolled over into poetry has always been a help during times of transition, during times of loss and things like that. And it hasn't been something that I've done regularly, but I do know that it does have the ability to assist with coping and healing. And when I learned of this opportunity, this workshop from Rudiger, I decided to to participate and learn a little more about that, and also to hopefully absorb some of your thoughts. So that's what attracted me to it, and I look forward to expanding what I know and what I believe, and also making a few potential improvements to my writing capability. Thank you.
Well, thank you, cousin-in-law, all the way from Virginia. And what Bobby mentioned is, I again want to underscore that we are all in this together. And that's also what I love about poetry. I've been in workshops, I've taught poetry, poetry that my students have written. I mean, my goodness, I've had students who published their poems for the very first time, and the thrill that I can see it in their eyes, and it brings me back to when I have my first few poems published. Poetry, I think, is such a great way to build community. And for me, we have 20 people here on a Saturday morning. I was going to say this at the end, I'll say it now. Your extended family, you know, we are in this together. And at the very end, you know, I'll share my personal contact information, because I encourage everyone to stay in touch as well. Anybody else? Yeah, we're good for time. And I think we can go to the next slide if you're all ready, you know, to start these exercises. And exercise is kind of a funny word, like, oh, you know, strenuous. This isn't going to be strenuous. We're going to talk about 3 types of poetry, and we'll start off with a highly structured poem. So what is a highly structured poem? For our time together here, we're just going to have, when we do try this, it's going to be 3 to 5 lines. The subject matter can be anything you wish, or if you're not sure, gee, what should I write here? It can be about how you're feeling now, a favorite memory, a place you love. So, you know, feel free to write about any subject matter. The only thing I would say is, you know, for all our time writing together, boy, no profanities, if that's okay for me to say. Now, I'll show you an example. For our time together here, we want to keep it short. So for a highly structured poem, just if we could go back 1 slide here, we want our line length to be consistent. Again, this is pretty informal, guys. Nobody's being graded, nobody's being judged, of course. But a highly structured poem, the line length is usually consistent with an approximate number of words. I have no more than 8. It can be 3 words, it can be 4 words. I have found for anything I'm trying for the first time or trying to get better at, to keep it short helps a lot. The other aspect of a highly structured poem is to keep a rhyme pattern consistent. And for our next slide, I'll show you an example I'm sure many of us are familiar with. It's a classic, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. And I'll read it kind of with a little emphasis on the rhythm and the rhyme scheme here. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Now, first, I want to take a deep breath because, again, for me, poems are kind of sacred, especially a poem like this. There's so much to unpack in this poem, but for our purposes, just wanted to emphasize. Oh, thank you so much, Andy. Yeah. That again, there's a lovely, lovely, consistent rhyme scheme. Roughly a consistent number of syllables, but again, poetry does not need to be complex. And when we go to exercise 2, I'll share with you why I definitely don't keep my poems complex. This is good for everyone to try. And the good news is, first of all, our timing is really good here. Second, we've got about 7, 8 minutes of nice quiet time to try this. 3 to 5 lines. Of course, I'm here to guide you, but it's your creativity. Again, I will just emphasize I'm not here to judge anybody. Nobody's getting a grade for this. So let's take those 7, 8 minutes, and my hope is that afterward, we'll take another 7 minutes or so for anyone who wishes to share. And before we, take those 7, 8 minutes, are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm wondering, I do see that it's going to be a rhyming poem, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding that.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
and again, Diana, well, first, thank you for asking your question. It is a rhyming poem.
Okay.
As you will see, yeah, I can't wait till we get to exercise 2, but I want us all to try exercise 1.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of loose rhyme schemes. That's how I write my poems. Don't worry about it being tightly consistent with rhymes. I would say try it.
Okay.
And let's enjoy it too. I want this Saturday morning for all of us to be enjoyable.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Any other questions?
All right, that's time for us.
Yeah. Well, first, I hope everyone enjoyed this. Second, this is my favorite part. And I can tell you for those who have been in poetry workshops before, I hope this is also your favorite part because we're a friendly group here. We're all friends. And this is a time for those who wish to share. And I cannot emphasize enough. Nobody's wanting or expecting perfection. It's just so wonderful to hear another person's poetic voice, whether this is the first time you've ever written a poem or it's the 100th time you've written a poem. So it always takes a little bravery here, but our timing is good. We have, I believe, about 7 to 9 minutes to share. So anybody else? We've shared Robert Frost poems. Thank you, Robert Frost. I actually went up to this beautiful, beautiful cemetery in New England, believe it or not, when I was 10 years old. I stood in front of Robert Frost's grave and I thanked him for his poetry. Kind of weird, but I was 10 years old. I've loved Robert Frost since I was a kid. So can't wait to hear your 3 to 5 lines of a highly structured poem. So who would like to be the first?
I'll read.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't title the poem, but it said, we went to our father's grave in Makawao on Father's Day with wilted flowers from our yards. After taking a photo, we left the Veterans Memorial. Our mom drove me home finally, and that was my poem.
And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's a personal experience, which is how poetry usually starts, right? We reach in ourselves to bring out the poem. I love the line consistency in it. I see a few more hands. Yasmin, I saw Jill's hand, but who would like to go next?
I'll go.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Hi. Hi.
Am I saying your name right?
You are.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Sure.
I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm joining you from Toronto.
Oh, wow.
I am here because I am just, what I feel for poetry is more than love. I see it as a way to express whatever may be going on in a way that is beyond prose, if that makes sense. So I find it can be quite profound and very expressive. I wouldn't say I'm an experienced poet. I have lots of draft poems. I've had a few poems published, but that's about it. And so I will read my poem, which is based on how I've been feeling. It hasn't been a great week in terms of avoiding or encountering irritation. So this is how I've been feeling. Constant reverberations strum in my body. Subtle irritations incite me to speak naughty. Instead, I hold my breath, my temper, bite my tongue, and taste something salty.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And Yasmin, I should say, I love Toronto.
Thank you. We have our issues here, but it's great. I think it's probably a great place to visit.
Oh my goodness. You know what? When I was a kid, I actually used to go to Toronto to play hockey sometimes. So what I loved, Yasmin, is the rhyme scheme, the consistency. And you know, I'm never one to count syllables unless I'm doing it for a student but I could hear it. I could hear it. So it's beautiful. And as you said, boy, I was engaged. And that's what you hope for. I mean, it's the biggest compliment in the world when somebody takes note. And when I've had pieces published in MidWeek and I have neighbors come up or somebody says, I read your piece. I'm like, wow, thank you. To take the time to do that. So thank you, Yasmin. And Lois Toyama, can't wait to hear your highly structured poem here.
It's very highly structured. I sit and watch the palm trees sway as gentle breezes blow our way. This class is great, I have to say. I'm happy for this Saturday.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I have the same birthday with Dr. Seuss, so I have this kind of rhyming gene.
Yeah, just beautiful, beautiful. You're a natural, Lois. You're a natural. So I think I saw Patricia raise her hand. Patricia, great.
Thank you. I lost sight of the fact that this was supposed to be highly structured, and I just simply kind of blabbed from my heart
Good.
how I was feeling. Sorry.
Good.
So I am not a poet. I just messed with it as a kid, and I'm just here to learn. So from my heart, this is what I wrote. This is something new for me, taking me out of the insanity, opening my mind to expand, working hard to set myself free, opening myself to possibilities, reaching out to find me, learning, yearning, grasping, not shutting down so blindly. Joy, oh joy in seeing me, embracing my mind freely, accepting what comes my way, beginning and ending with possibilities.
Well, Patricia, you are a poet. We're all poets, by the way, but that was beautiful, beautiful. And I'm hearing a lot of humility here, everybody. We're a humble group, but I'll tell you what, poetry is a leap of faith. You have the courage not only to write the words, to think the words, but then to share the words. It just beautiful. I was hoping our format would be like this. Alofa and Anissa are keeping me on track here. I think we have a few more minutes. I see a few more hands. So Andy, and then Diana, how would that be before we go on to exercise 2?
Hi, all. Yes, okay. It's a bit of a late night for me tonight, so but yeah, I had to go up, Peter. Yeah, this is it. The rhythm count's not quite right, but I think I've got the right one. Okay, so I've got side covers as well. Past the woods at the edge of the graveyard, I see you across the dust there, across the woods, a fleeting glare, reaching the spot, nobody is there. The breeze moaning out across the frost. The name is lost. It is lost.
Well, Andy, first of all, I would give anything to have your accent. Anything.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can barter. Second is just beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
And I do hope we stay in touch, everybody, because as I'm hearing these, I can't wait to hear them again. And I have always said to my students, and I do this for myself, anytime you hear a good poem, take it in, take a deep breath, and hear it a second time, read it a second time. And again, I will say poems have been lifelong companions. I go back to poems that I read 20 years ago. They are reassuring for me. They're friends who never leave me. Diana.
Okay, there is a little short bridge from Hilo to a place, tiny little island, and it's called Coconut Island. And so here it goes. The bridge we take to move and breathe above the sea, bathed in the breeze, turns us to birds with fish below. My son and I together go, the bridge we take to move and breathe. That was it.
Thank you. The other thing I'll say about poetry is it transports you, right? And Diana, I was transported by your poem. I could see myself there.
Thanks. I'm a NAMI volunteer, and our son is the reason I am. So it's a very wonderful walk that we take together.
And thank you for saying we take together, because absolutely, we all take this together. That's why I want to keep this going, guys, beyond the workshop today, and that will come at the end. But I do have my contact information in there. So we thank you. Anissa anticipated my thought there. We're moving to a loosely structured poem. And I want to say this is my favorite type of poem. I've been writing poems since I was 7 years old. Once in a while, I've moved out of my comfort zone, either with a tightly structured poem or free verse. Guess what? I always go back to loosely structured poetry. That is who I am as a poet. Why do I like it? Okay. Line length, boy, it can be consistent, but not strictly consistent. The same with the rhyme pattern. It's more relaxed. I love near or indirect rhymes. In fact, indirect rhymes, I could write a book about it. I might someday. Just indirect rhymes, a highly underestimated part of poetry. Near rhymes, they're also called near rhymes. Not an exact rhyme. And what a loosely structured poem, it allows you to be free. So before we go to the next exercise or the next example, I'll just say again, we're doing so well here that just continue to write whatever comes to your mind. We had such beautiful, beautiful poems read to us for our first exercise. Anything that can make you hopeful, anything you wish to write about. I think with this group, and I get a good sense of this, we're great. Anissa, if we could go to the next slide, just a example here of another classic here. I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman. I hear America singing the varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing as he makes ready for work or leaves off work, the boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck, the shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands, the woodcutter's song, the plowboy's on his way in the morning, or at noon intermission or at sundown, the delicious singing of the mother, or of the young wife at work, or the girl sewing or washing, each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else, the day what belongs to the day, at night the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong melodious song. We take a deep breath, we acknowledge Walt Whitman, and again, what we notice here is the repetition. With the participles, boy, the singing, the waking, the sewing, the washing. Again, please feel you don't need to use participles. Strong verbs are great, participles are great, nouns are great. I would say just continue what we did with the first exercise. Take 7-8 minutes. I think we're good, Alofa, and then I look forward to our time for sharing.
All right, that's time.
Yeah, so what I would say, and I think we can go into full group picture here, is I had one of my best mentors ever would say after a poem, how did it feel? So that would be my question to you, as we try these different writing exercises, how did it feel? I hope it felt good. We have such a great group here. We can just keep on going and a brave person to share. Mel, would love to hear from you.
First, I kind of have a bit of a question. When you said, how does it feel? I struggle with, I guess it's like a perfectionistic feeling like I'm doing it right and I want to do it right, even though it's art and there's no right or wrong. But so to answer the how does it feel, it's like, well, did I do it right? But I know I don't know if you have anything that you can speak to on that, because I know it's my own inner battle, but that comes up.
Yeah, Mel, I mean, I really appreciate, again, this group is so terrific. You know, the honesty here. And I think it is part of coping. It's funny, you know, when I write, Mel, I would say I expect a fair amount of myself because I've been writing for so long, poetry and prose, although poetry is, I'm a natural poet. I have worked hard to become a decent prose writer. Um, what helps me, Mel, is that I when I sit down and write, I'm going to try my best. And my best is going to be what I can achieve in the moment. I can go back to it. That is the beauty of poetry. You can go back. You can go back 2 days later. You can go back when you're feeling a wave of momentum for whatever is happening in your day or in your life. That holds true for going back 2 years later, 5 years later. And I know what it means to be a perfectionist. I was the type of guy, I always wanted to turn in my homework early. And if I didn't, I would get upset with myself until I realized, hey, Rudiger, for Pete's sake, that's too much. You know, and I think it's the same with writing, that we try to do our best. The good news is you're trying, right? That's what counts most in life, I believe.
Thanks.
Hope that
Yeah.
helped.
Yes. And I'll share. I think I got rhymey at the end, but it wasn't intentional. I feel the expansion of dance exercising my mind. As my toes float above floorboards of oak, my spirit rises towards that of the moon. It's in this swift movement that my heart finds stillness, and away I float tethered to a balloon.
Beautiful. What I hear, Mel, is the strong verbs. It's funny because Walt Whitman used, you know, a lot of participles. I've also worked as a journalist, and what I love is good, strong verbs, which you can bring into poetry. And I heard that word tethered. Actually, that's one of my favorite verbs for different reasons. So thank you. And thank you for being brave. It's always hard to be the first. It was just beautiful.
Thank you.
The other thing I want to say before I forget, because we'll have one more exercise after this, is that these different types of poetry structures do blend into each other. So loose verse, which has been our exercise, our current exercise, boy, does that blend into parts of free verse or highly structured verse. There have been classes where you know you are held to a specific number of syllables. You are held to. I don't believe in that. That's why the loose verse has always been my favorite form of writing poetry, because it allows you to breathe. It allows for creativity. It allows for you. I think it opens you up to try something new. Quite frankly. Anybody else? Bobby.
Thank you. I first, to answer the question, how does it make me feel with this one? Because I was inspired by a couple things that were shared. I feel honest, and I'm also making a choice to trust this beautiful group of people. So I think it's a safe environment as well to share. I didn't know what I was going to write about. I thought, oh no, what am I even going to write? And then having just heard the poem by Walt Whitman and also the bridge to Coconut Island are what inspired me. So here's what I wrote. As I drive the Walt Whitman Bridge into the city of brotherly love, I meet my past through recollections that squeeze my heart with who I was.
Beautiful. And again, although this was loosely structured, the structure felt right for me. It wasn't too tight, it wasn't too loose. And you know, all credit to you, because this was a kind of a spontaneous exercise. And we'll move into that. For our last exercise, what I want to say is the sharing has been so great that I want to leave some time in that after exercise 3. This was an hour and a half. Samaritan and Nami have been so generous in giving us an hour and a half. I honestly feel with this group that we could comfortably go to 2.5 hours. Alofa, don't worry, I'm not going to. Alofa and Anissa have put this all together and have been working really, really hard. But this is a wonderful, wonderful group. So I want to, if it's okay, move into exercise 3 and then have a little bit more time for sharing and then closing, if that's okay with everybody. So as I said, free verse, it's the easiest, freest form of writing. If honestly, the line length doesn't have to have consistency. The rhyme pattern is far more relaxed. I have near or indirect rhymes are fine. Actually, no rhyming is fine as well. And I know people who adore this because they don't want to be tethered to any kind of structure. Quite frankly, for me, I like some structure, but not rigid structure. And the example that I'll share, which is our next slide, again, this may be familiar to you, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Now, those last 2 lines are, boy, I think many of us here know them. I repeat them to myself whenever I'm doing a marathon. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Free verse is spontaneous. Free verse is as you like it, to borrow from Shakespeare. I love the sharing from this group. So I would say, again, let's take about 7 minutes so that we have time for sharing in our closing, if that's all right with everyone. Any questions before we take our 7 or so minutes? Oh, good. This group has been terrific. I can't wait to hear what we come up with.
All right, we're at 7 minutes.
Yeah, I think our timing has worked out really, really well here. Again, thank you, everybody. To invoke Tess Gallagher, who was the first famous poet I studied with. How did it feel? And then share. And then I think we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left for our closing at the end. Boy, I wish this could go on and on and on. I did put my contact information in the chat. It'll also be shown on a slide. Boy, fun to read the comments in the chat. Andy, I want your accent. Okay. So again, free verse, anything goes. Look forward to perhaps hearing from someone who hasn't spoken yet. Be brave, but you don't have to be brave.
I can go.
Great. Terrific.
Who can make today special? Is it the tree, my dog, or the sky? Or can it be me? Yes, whispered the wind. Everyone can make special days, shouted the rain. The sun rose and said, every being makes every day special. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I got, you prefer to be called, is it KS? Or is that correct? Yeah, I agree with Anissa. It made me feel gratitude, which again is a wonderful, wonderful way of coping, creating. I often bring gratitude into anything I write. I think that puts me in a good frame of mind. You know, I just look around, whether it's my home, my family, and that puts me in a great frame of mind. Okay, Sheldon, I had seen your hand up. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
I'd like to say that this isn't the way I usually write. Usually an idea comes to my head and it forms, and then when I'm ready, I sit down and write it out. I actually wrote something before class today. But I was wondering if I could read all three of my poems, because what I did is I rewrote the same poem 3 times.
Yeah,
Is that all right?
I think that'll
I mean,
work. I think we've
that's
got.
short. That's short. They're short.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Type 1 was, I have no appetite, no sense of taste. It's a reaction to some medicine. Although I need to eat and hate to waste, all food brings up a vision of venison. Type 2 was, if my stomach could see, it would see venison. Taking medicine, it's hard to swallow food. I feel tired, in a desultory mood. Type 3, I'm not a hunter. I don't want to shoot a deer just for sport. What I'd like to do is follow the deer. It wants to show me something about how to rid the world of evil beings that cause so much hurt to gentle ones.
Well, thank you, Sheldon. Beautiful, and the continuity in all three. And I'm glad you wrote something before the workshop as well. I mean, that's my hope, of course, for any workshop that is poetry, especially that as we come into it, we kind of come into a good frame of mind, and also that after we leave the workshop, that we continue. You know, we take what we've gained from our community here. It's a wonderful new community, and we keep that going. Anybody else for sharing? Oh, good. I see some hands. Andy.
Okay, yes. Okay, yes. My other piece, this piece I've done. This is a love poem from my wife, this one, actually. You and I. Let us go then, you and I. Face the world tomorrow morning. Walk into the sunrise and past Shepley Woods. Then Angel Meadows when we get to Manchester. Holding our hands together, side by side past the canal. And let our love not say a thing.
Okay. Haunting. I found it haunting, and it's going to stay with me. Which again is that's, I think, what many writers hope for, many artists, that a part of you stays with someone. Again, that's such a compliment when that happens. Um, my thanks to all of you, because what you've written today is going to stay with me. And here we are, many of us meeting each other for the first time. And what a gift you've all given me in my home today. So thank you. Lois, I see your hand.
This kind of is similar to Diana's. Walking the trail with a camera, I frame my shots and see beauty previously unnoticed, the lens bringing wonder into focus.
Beautiful. Beautiful. How did free verse, of the three types of different poem structures we worked on today, what felt best to, or someone, any answer is fine. We've got a couple minutes here before our closing. Anybody want to volunteer? Which one of the three exercises felt most comfortable and why? Patricia.
I'm typically just the rhymey person, sing, song, rhyme. And so I did this last one deliberate, and it's short, just 6 lines. I did it deliberately not to rhyme. And I think I like this type better because it brought out a thought pattern rather than a sing song for me. So this is called New. Blue, I see blue, ocean and sky and me. The dawning day opens beckoning, pulling, beseeching. Today, what will I be?
Yeah, and I love that. The self-discovery of poetry. Today, what will I be? Boy, don't we all wake up with that, right? And that's the beauty of poetry too, because I think poetry helps you to decide, but also discern, who am I today? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I want to mention that we've had a few poems written in chat, which are also quite beautiful, if you have a chance to take a look at those. Anybody else? Alofa and Anissa have been so great about mapping this out. And I thought, I can do my part by helping us stay on track. Like I said, boy, this gives me a lot of hope, because quite frankly, I felt like for each exercise, we could have gone 15, 30 minutes longer, just how well this group responded. And I want to thank you all for that. And since I'm in the thanking mode here, I have said this. I really, really wish to thank everyone for taking time this Saturday morning for Andy. I know it's a different time of day for our friend from Toronto as well. For taking a leap of faith to be here, to put your words down on paper or on your computer or in a text, above all for sharing. People say, oh my goodness, you shared your email, you shared your phone number. Yes, I did. I could tell within 2 minutes that this is a wonderful group. I will say you're welcome. You're my extended family now. And again, I wish to thank Rochelle of Samaritan Counseling, Alofa and Anissa. Without them, this never, ever would have happened. And it's just been such a privilege to be with you all today.
Thank you, Rudiger. Thank you so much for leading today's workshop. And thank you all for joining us for Creative Coping. Now, before we sign off, I do have a few quick things to review. I've just put 2 links in the chat. The first link is for submitting your work to our Creative Coping booklet. We ask that you complete the intellectual property consent form so we can include your poem or any work that you'd like to share. And second, you'll find a link for our survey. Please go ahead and click on that link and fill out the survey now. It's not too long and it'll help us make our next workshop better. If you'd like to revisit the exercises you did today or recommend them to a friend who couldn't attend, you'll be able to find a recording of today's workshop on Samaritan Counseling Center Hawaii's YouTube channel in a week or 2. And I've sent out an email that has the links to all of these that should have arrived in your inbox now, actually. It was scheduled to go out at 11:30 a.m. Hawaii time. And of course, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again for joining us and take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. I've really enjoyed this tonight.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sad that this will end. If there's
Me
ever
too.
a follow-up, let us know.
Me too. I don't want it to end.
No.
Let's do another one.
Yes.
Excuse me, Rudiger, do you live in Hawaii?
I do. I live in Manoa. Yeah, I live in, yeah, in Oahu. Yeah.
Do you have a job?
I do.
What do you
And unfortunately I work from home. I teach for a school in New York City with that 6-hour time difference, so I get up pretty early. And I'm also a consultant for actually a wonderful nonprofit that wants to make mental health services accessible to everyone. So
okay.
yeah, I have the great, it's called Transcend Integration. I have the great privilege of being able to work from home. And I love our home. But this also, what I have found, the pandemic has brought this home, is that I get to meet people this way from all over the world. And it's so funny, my students in New York City, I never would have been able to meet them without this virtual world.
Great.
And sometimes I do venture out of the home, but I've got to say I rarely venture out of Manoa.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.